Hey everybody, this is Mohammed Educator from the Stevens Initiative here in Washington, D.C. I hope everybody's having a great afternoon or evening or morning wherever you are in the world and tuning in. We have folks from around the world on this webcast. I'm so appreciative that you all could join us, and we're really excited for today's webinar, which is focused on training and supporting teachers to facilitate virtual exchange. It's a really, really important topic because virtual exchange can't happen without teachers, and we want teachers to have the training and the understanding of how to facilitate a great experience for their students so they can connect with their peers and learn about one another and learn with one another. We're joined today by two awesome presenters, Rana El Sharif joining us from Amman, Jordan, who will be presenting on behalf of the Global Nomads Group, and Jamila Jaffrey is joining us from Chicago, Illinois, here in the United States. And Jamila took a leadership role in the STEAMuseum that has seen a lot of success as part of the Chicago Sister Cities partnership. So we're really excited to have them on board, and I'm so thankful that they were able to join us to present their knowledge. A few quick housekeeping notes. If you have questions, please enter your questions in the chat box. We'll also be taking a look at our Twitter account. It's Stevens INIT on Twitter. So if you want to either follow us or submit some questions, we prefer in the questions box. Secondly, if you have any technical issues, please submit them into the chat box on the right side of your screen. We'll be looking at that periodically to make sure everything is smooth. And then quickly, I'd also like to mention that our next month, in the month of May, we hope that you all will be able to join us on May 17th and 18th for our annual virtual exchange forum here in Washington, D.C. in our offices. If you go to our website, www.stevensinitiative.org, you'll find a bit more information. That event will also be live streamed on the internet in the event that you cannot make it. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Rana to kick us off today. Rana, please take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here to be talking about virtual exchange and the work that we do with educators. So right now I'm sharing my screen, and I just need to check, moving on with the slides. So as Mohammed introduced, I'm Rana Sharif, Program Coordinator at Global Nomads Group, and I am joining from Amman, Jordan. This is something that we always like to share, like where we're joining from which part of the world, just how technology helps us in connecting with one another. So a little bit about Global Nomads Group and our organization. We aim to foster dialogue and understanding among the world's youth. And the way we want to do that is by leveraging technology, as we're doing right now, also utilizing storytelling techniques, and enabling meaningful conversations between middle school and high school students that promote empathy, action orientation, and global awareness to hopefully become these global citizens. We have been founded or established since 1998. And so over the past 20 years, we have been able to reach almost 1 million young individuals to have them join these conversations from all over the world. You can see the different pinpoints over here. We have our headquarters in New York in the United States, and also our regional office in Amman, Jordan. So I want to talk a bit about how we empower educators, or how we work with educators to help them in including these virtual exchange programs with their students and kind of customizing it across our different countries and regions where we work. So usually when we start working with our educators, they get the chance to participate either in-person professional development sessions or virtual professional development sessions, kind of similar to what we're doing now. And when we're thinking about the information, let's say, that educators would need, or the tools that they would need in order to implement such programs in their classrooms, we kind of think of what you can see in front of you, the KBADs, or what they need to know and be able to do. And definitely some of the things we think of is not only the student outcomes, let's say developing the 21st century workforce skills, or just how we can help our youth to become more empathetic and globally aware, but also customizing across context. If we have an educator who is doing this as part of an extracurricular classroom, so what can they do, or an extracurricular club? So what can they do to incorporate, let's say, the fun, interactive component of the program? If we have educators maybe who are incorporating this as part of their English class or history class or social studies class. So we kind of think of how we can empower them with resources and tools to help them accommodate the program within their learning outcomes or the standards that they're hoping to achieve in their class. So when we're thinking of the in-person professional development session, we always ensure to have it something interactive where educators are working together. This could be a one-day event, let's say 4 to 5 hours. That is, of course, for the in-person PD. When we're thinking of the virtual PD, it is a bit more flexible, let's say. It is a total of 4 hours and divided into 2 professional development sessions, where again, it's similar content, both in person and virtual, but again, it's customized to suit, let's say, the technology that we are using. Again, something else that we always focus on when we are providing these professional development sessions is thinking of the content that educators will be implementing with their students or the activities. So one interactive component of the PD or professional development is not only going over the scope and sequence, the flow of the activities and how they are all connected with one another. We also give educators the chance to play the role of the students. They get the chance to act out these activities as though they were students, and that can also help them imagine what this can look like in their classroom. So here we have a picture of an educator who is doing one activity that we call the values exercise, where students would choose their values and try to write it not only, let's say, in one language, but also in their partner class's language. So you see loyalty, wafa, and loyalty in Spanish that unfortunately I cannot read. So this is one thing that we do. Again, definitely something else that is part of the virtual exchange will always be the technology. So one thing that we also make sure to empower educators in using so that they can pass on this information to their students is using the online platform. The online platform is what students will be using during the interaction. And so our online platform is called G&G Connect. So we empower educators to know how to use it, where students will be posting, how they can edit, how they can comment, how they can utilize the different features that are on the platform to have these engaging and meaningful dialogue. We also empower them to learn more about the platform as a resource. A lot of, let's say, resources, activities, supplemental material would be found on that platform. So it's not only for students to use, but it's also for educators to utilize as a place to have this ongoing learning and have these different techniques to implement, let's say, the program and the different activities. So after educators engage in this PD, where they are able to have these learning outcomes, learn more about the content, the curriculum, the online platform, after PD, it does not stop there. Rather, they are then introduced to a partner educator. So the way our programs work is that the virtual exchange happens between 2 paired classrooms. And so the paired classroom you're working with as an educator, there is also a partner educator who you will be collaborating with to ensure the smooth implementation of the program. So after this PD, you would be introduced to a partner educator where together you will collaborate on deadlines for activities, and even throughout the implementation, you will discuss with one another different strategies, how you implemented the program, how you did the different activities. Maybe a lot of times we see educators sharing with each other how they did a certain lesson or a certain activity, and that's an interesting way to get this global perspective of how another teacher would do it from a different place around the world. The other thing that we try to also empower educators with or help educators with is that after PD, we also offer programmatic and technical support. Each educator will be introduced to, let's say, a focal point at G&G. That could be someone like myself, who would be their focal point in case they needed any additional support or guidance. If they are facing challenges with using, let's say, the platform, or they just want to get additional ideas or insights, we are always there to support if it is needed. we are also, they can reach us on the online platform or also whenever they get our contact info as well. So in front of you, you see our different organizational contacts. Please feel free to learn more about G&G on our website. We have an email, Twitter, Instagram, any other social media platform, we're on there. I do have my own email on there as well, in case anyone wants to reach out to me to learn more. So that is it for G&G. I'd like to hand it over now to Jamila from the STEAMuseum Chicago Sister Cities International. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. Hello, everyone. I am excited to talk about STEAMuseum. And STEAMuseum is so unlike Global Nomads, this is a new project. So as I'm talking about our program and our activities, one of the things that may be useful to some of the folks here is thinking about how do you get one of these programs started? What are some of the key themes and some of the key ideas to keep in mind when trying to get a virtual exchange program started and supporting educators and teachers to do the work in this in this field. So high level. What is STEAMuseum? So STEAMuseum is a virtual exchange program that is geared specifically for high school youth in Chicago, Illinois, and in Casablanca, Morocco. And the students are creating digital exhibits on this online virtual museum, which is called STEAMuseum. And the acronym stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Art or Architecture, and then the M for the museum. And so what the youth are actually doing is that they're using virtual exchange both sort of asynchronously and synchronously to talk to one another, to develop these online exhibits, and using STEAM, using science, technology, engineering, and art as a vehicle to develop common understanding and to see the connections between each other's cities and each other's worlds. So that's, and then through the work, what students are doing is that they're developing really critical 21st century skills like communicating, collaboration, digital literacy, and language skills. So next slide, Ron, I think, are you? Yes, thank you. And so what are some key themes when you're thinking about developing a virtual exchange project? And so one of the things that is really important to us as we're thinking about this project and we're thinking about supporting teachers is this question of equity. Who has access to technology? Who has the opportunity to do virtual exchange? Who has the opportunity to travel? And how do we use this as a vehicle to provide more equity and access and opportunity to young people who may not otherwise have this this great chance? And so one of the things that we thought about was when we are working with teachers and with programs in Chicago and in Casablanca, we really wanted to make sure that we were reaching those young people from communities that are historically underrepresented in the sciences, technology, engineering, and arts, and particularly architecture. And so in Chicago, Illinois, we really wanted to focus in on those communities, on African American and Latino communities. And in Casablanca, we're working with an organization, IDMAJ, that does programming for young people that, again, may not have access to high quality experiences and opportunities to do virtual exchange and to use technology. And so that was a really critical piece to our work, is to keep equity at the core of our work with engaging teachers and with young people. The second key theme was, is connecting with classroom work. And so we wanted to make sure that as we're developing STEAMuseum, and we're only in the second year of this project, is that we wanted to make sure that the program wasn't just sort of being placed into the teachers' classrooms without any context, but that it was really bridged to the work that they were already doing. And that was important because this is a pilot. We wanted to make sure that we have buy-in, but also that there really is communication and collaboration with the educators. And so in our second year, what we have realized is, so as an example, in our first year, we piloted this in a chemistry class. Because this is STEAMuseum, we thought it would make sense for this virtual exchange to happen in a science class. What we realized is that because there's so much emphasis on language, and particularly Arabic and French and English, that we wanted to move it into a language class. But that sort of came out when we started thinking about how does this work really intentionally connect with teachers' goals, and with what they are trying to do in the classroom and how they are assessing learning in the classroom. And so that's the second sort of key theme that is central to our work as we're supporting our educators. The third thing is actually providing a program facilitator. So because we are a pilot, we wanted to make sure that we were building infrastructure and capacity for our teachers to really understand how this program is operationalized in the classroom. And that was important. For us, because we are doing a pilot, we wanted to make sure that sort of all the pieces were there and that there really was somebody dedicated on the ground in the classrooms in Chicago and in Casablanca. And so we actually have program facilitators that work directly with the students and the teachers in the classroom. And so the teachers, they can see how this program is actually implemented. And it also ensures that there's communication always between the project team and also with the educators on the ground. And so so the way that we do that is actually through this process of co-designing. That is a really important part of our work. And so that fourth piece that I have here on the slide around building a team is actually really critical. We wanted to make sure that the program facilitators, that curriculum, myself as a curriculum writer, and our project director, that we were really, and our educators, we were really working as a team and we're really thinking about co-designing. So this process has been very iterative for us. There's been a lot of feedback, and we really, we meet weekly, actually, with our program facilitators, and we really think about what is happening in the classroom. What is the feedback that the educators, that the teachers are providing you? What is the feedback that the youth are providing you? How can we iterate? How can we modify, adapt this curriculum so that it's really localized to the classroom, and it really makes sense to the teachers and how they are assessing learning and how they are helping their young people. Next slide, Rana, thank you. So supporting teachers. So this is a little bit more specific about understanding the needs of the teachers. So as we have been doing this project, there have sort of been four kind of things that have elevated and bubbled up for us as we think about supporting teachers in virtual exchange through STEAMuseum. And one of them sort of goes back to this technological equity question. Who has access to technology? And that is not just about, what we realize is that that is not just for the young people, but also for teachers. And I think sometimes in our work, we think about, the young people, which of course is critical, but also we need to think about the teachers and what access they have and how comfortable they feel. And so the program facilitators have really not only been providing access to technology for young people, but also training and working with the teachers to make sure that they feel comfortable with the technology that we're using, and that they are that they're understanding sort of the different ways, whether it's WhatsApp or it's Google Chat or Google Hangouts that we use for our virtual exchanges, that there really is a comfort in using that technology. So that's one really important thing for us as we support teachers, is not to make assumptions about the use and access to technology. The second thing is expanding cultural awareness. So we know that expanding cultural awareness is a goal for STEAMuseum for the young people, but it's also a goal for the educators as well. And so part of our work, certainly at the beginning of the program, has been really thinking about how do we ensure that teachers themselves are aware of the nuances and of the wide range of what it means to be culturally aware about Chicago and also about Casablanca. And so our program facilitators, again, have been incredibly have been incredible about being really explicit about talking about cultural awareness, about talking about assumptions when we do virtual exchanges. What do you think the young people will see? What assumptions do they have? What questions do they have? What questions do the teachers have? And so that has also been a really intentional way to support virtual exchange. The third thing is important when we're talking about structuring classrooms. So virtual exchange requires a teacher to do things a little bit differently in the classroom than perhaps they may be traditionally accustomed to. So the program facilitators here as a role model, doing the activities and leading the activities and showing how young people can actually own the work as they're designing the exhibits, has been really critical. So we're using technology actually as a way of providing the curriculum and the activities online so that they are accessible to the students and so that they can proceed at their own pace. And that is a little bit different than how it works in a classroom traditionally, where each lesson sort of happens and the teacher guides that lesson and the students sort of receive that lesson and then move forward with it. Here, it's a little bit, our goal is to make it more student driven by providing all of the activities online through a platform that we are using through Digital Youth Network here in Chicago, and that platform is called iRemix. And so that has been really important too, so thinking very intentionally about how our program facilitators are modeling that behavior for our teachers. And the fourth thing is thinking about how we as STEAM Museum are supporting our teachers to then in turn support students who typically struggle in the classroom. And so STEAM Museum, because equity was a critical piece and we wanted to make sure that virtual exchange was being provided to young people who may not traditionally have access, part of that is making sure that we're reaching young people who may not necessarily be academically successful. And so part of our work in supporting teachers is thinking about what are the strategies that you use? How can STEAM Museum be used as a strategy to engage your young people who may typically be disengaged from the content that may be in the classroom? And then next slide, please. Thanks, Rana. Great. So our program facilitators. So what is it that we exactly do with our program facilitators? And I talked about this. And so one of them is weekly engagement with teachers and students. And so our program facilitators are in the classroom every single week and working with our teachers and with our young people. And then in turn we have weekly meetings with our project team. So again, there's this constant iteration and constant feedback and communication and a lot of teamwork and collaboration that's happening here. And we're not afraid to make any changes to the curriculum at all because the goal of the curriculum, again, is to support young people and to support teachers in virtual exchange. So so that is something that's been really critical to us. And as I mentioned, the program facilitators model teaching, and they modify activities according to the needs and priorities of the teachers, and then also identify specific areas to expand support. So a little bit of hyper-local support here. So as an example, the students in Casablanca went on a field trip to a museum, and that was really important because museums are not necessarily accessible, particularly as field trips or just even as outings for young people in Casablanca with the particular community with whom we're working. And so our program facilitator decided to take all the young people on an actual museum field trip, which was amazing. And so being able to provide some support around that curriculum and around that activity was really critical. And then next slide. And so here's just some contact information. If you go to the website, chicagosistercities.com, Initiative STEAM Museum, you'll actually see a video of our work, which I encourage you to see. It's a short 4-minute video. I've also provided my personal email there if you'd like to communicate with us and if you have any further questions, and then our Twitter handle, which I hope that you'll use. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamila, and thanks, Rana, for your great presentations. I'm Henry Shepard. I also work on the Stevens Initiative, and we're so thrilled to have these great leaders here today to talk about their programs. Rana, I invite you to come back on video as well, and we invite everyone in the audience today to pose your questions in the questions box. So anything that you'd like to know about, whether it was a technical detail that was mentioned or any overarching questions you have about teacher training and support or anything about virtual exchange program design, we welcome your questions. Again, please submit them by typing them in the questions box rather than the chat box, and we'll take a few moments to let you submit your questions and pull them together and try to share them with the presenters. One question we received a few minutes ago from Kristen was just to go back to part of Rana's presentation and ask Rana, could you clarify what is a KBAD?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. KBADs would stand for know and be able to do. It's kind of like a different way in explaining what we mean by learning outcomes. It's also a way for us to be like more specific in not only the knowledge that an educator would need to know, but also what would they need to do. Because definitely our goal is to empower educators to implement the program independently. And so when we specify these different aspects, this helps us in designing our agenda and designing what this professional development training would look like. Thanks.
Thanks, Rana. We have a few questions coming in now, which is wonderful to see. So I'll try to get to them in an order that makes some sense if I can, or just cover them all in the amount of time we have, because we certainly have a lot of great questions. We have one here from Svetlana, and Svetlana asks, what are the difficulties, other than technical difficulties, that teachers face when organizing intercultural interaction for their students? And do the teachers have the opportunity to discuss the difficulties with each other? And if so, in what format would you do that? I know you might have touched on this a bit, both at the training phase as well as at the supporting phase, but what can you say about the challenges teachers face, as well as how, if ever, those might be addressed through some sort of peer discussion? And either of you are welcome to start and pass it on to the other.
Sure, I can go first. So this is a great question that we face, and educators definitely face, even, when, let's say, they're implementing something like this for the first time. There's definitely this learning curve, and kind of beyond the technical challenges, utilizing the platform, there are always these different challenges when you are, let's say, having this conversation across difference, or just in this cultural exchange. Understanding the different contexts. So one thing that I touched upon this a bit, where we have this partner educator, paired classrooms going through this interaction. And so most of our curricula would rely on this interdependence. And finishing one activity depends on both parties completing it and moving on to the next. So one main thing that some educators might face, just because knowing different contexts, different school challenges might come up, weather sometimes is something that comes up that can change the deadline. So these are some of the things where educators would learn this flexibility, and being able to translate that flexibility within their classrooms. Also, just empowering students to have these conversations, these meaningful connections with one another, definitely takes work in just helping them having this confidence. If they are shy, definitely we're talking about students who have different capabilities or different forms of expressing themselves. In our work with MENA, one challenge that we sometimes face is the language component. Students being able to communicate with each other in English. Of course, this is something we face across both partners. If you have students participating who English maybe is not their first language. And so working with different tools to help them to communicate with one another is also something that we hear, or that educators try to work with. We do provide them with different resources and tools online that can help students in strengthening, let's say, their English proficiency in order to be able to have these conversations and express themselves. Thanks.
That's great, Rana. And I can also add in terms of STEAMuseum. So thinking about the teachers and the intercultural exchange, because we're a pilot, one of the things that we were able to do is to have our teachers actually go to each other's cities. So in the first year of the pilot, we actually had our Chicago teachers go to Casablanca, and vice versa, have our teachers in Casablanca come over to Chicago. So that in and of itself was a huge part of helping to sort of understand what each other's cities look like, feel like, smell like, and have those conversations really face-to-face in each other's cities. And so that was one way to support the work. The other way that we help teachers, because we are a small cohort, is at the end of the year for both years of our project, is really sitting down together and having a debrief and really talking about this in a very explicit manner, and talking about ways that we could support the project for the following year. So for example, things that helped us in the first year was this language question that Rana brought up. And so thinking that's one of the pieces of feedback that one of our teachers gave us, is that language is really important. And so perhaps this isn't perhaps thinking about moving this from the science classroom into a language classroom will help us in that intercultural exchange. And so that's an example of a type of feedback that really went into modifying where this program would go. What I do also want to say is that for students, because we're working with young people from communities historically underrepresented in the sciences in Chicago, and then in Casablanca, students who are historically underrepresented in the sciences, and technological equity is a question. We're really explicit in the very beginning about talking about similarities, and about in our sort of the political world today, thinking about the types of prejudices and stereotypes that people may have about young people in each other's cities. And so, for example, in the Chicago classrooms, I went in and, as an example, said, what do you think that what that people think of Black kids in Chicago? Like, we know, like, what are the stereotypes that people have about us here in the city of Chicago? What stereotypes do we have about young people in Casablanca? And having a conversation about that, and thinking about that this STEAMuseum is really an opportunity to talk about our assets, to talk about young people as assets, as incredible change makers, as leaders, as the people that are going to be voting, as people that are going to be causing change in the world. And that really being a way of talking about intercultural exchange, and sort of grounding it in the wealth of assets that young people bring to the table, and how this can be an opportunity to overcome some of those stereotypes.
Thank you, Jamila and Rana, for your answers. We had a lot of questions that have come in, and I think they line up to a very good sequence of discussion. So I'm thrilled to continue the conversation, and I'll try to start maybe conceptually at an early level again, and we can kind of go through from the early phase of a program through to some ending phase questions. Rachel asks, what have you found to be the most successful ways to gain teacher and school buy-in for professional development?
Jamila, would you like to go first? I can go first.
For teacher buy-in, I think for us, what has been really important, and for school buy-in, is to really show the importance of the work that the virtual exchange is going to have for learning in the classroom, and how this is going to enhance learning in the classroom. And that is why the conversation with the teachers on the front end, thinking about, what are your outcomes for young people? What is it that you want to learn? How are you aligning, your activities with standards that are whether they are local or state standards. For us in the United States, when we think about state standards and we think about federal standards, which are then sort of the national standards. Those are really explicit conversations, so that we really think about, how this program is really enhancing the work of teachers in the classroom, and being able to tell that story. So that is one key piece for us that has been critical to get buy-in from the schools and from the teachers themselves.
Yeah, just echoing what Jamila just mentioned, the idea of global education and developing students' global citizenship, and thinking of the skills that students will gain after having this experience. If we're talking about collaboration, connecting with a global world, connecting with someone and having these meaningful connections with a part of the world that you probably don't know anything about. Sometimes we hear students saying, we don't know anything about, this specific place. And so usually with both educators and schools, they see this as in its own, not only participating, but also being part of the training, all of it as part of a professional development opportunity, doing every activity, engaging in every cultural exchange is something that definitely adds a lot of resources, a lot of techniques. We have some educators, if we're talking about the language component, if we're talking about incorporating technology within the classroom, this could be a new concept, and this is kind of an organic way to help them be introduced to that. So these are some of the things that get educators excited about just participating and just seeing the value and benefit of doing something like this.
Thank you so much. I know for those of you in the audience who are involved in similar programs or who are teachers, you likely have dozens of additional ideas or questions or challenges or insights that you could share on the subject too. And so I'm pleased to share these, but I know that this community collectively has a lot to say about this, and everybody has the things that are challenges for them and the insights that they have. So this is a great start to a conversation that I know will continue for a long time. Catherine and Z ask, how much do you involve teachers in the curriculum writing, if at all, and how do you involve them?
I can talk about, so I am the curriculum writer for STEAMuseum, and so that is a great question. And so the way that we do that is, as I had mentioned before, is sort of doing the iterative design and doing a lot of feedback. And so we go in with our activities, and we're really with our program facilitators that are actually in the classroom, again, really talking about what are the goals. And so I really love how Rana talked about the sort of the, is it the KBAD? Is that what it, and so same thing. So it's like sort of thinking about what is it, we're very specific about what is it that young people are supposed to accomplish in the classroom, and then making sure that that aligns with what teachers are doing, and then doing the activities around that. So, but really it's kind of specifically, it is, the teachers are in the classroom when the activities are happening. And so anything that needs to get modified, the teachers are, they will let us know, I think this should be changed, I think that should be changed. So as an example, with STEAM Museum, our STEAM Museum this year is focused on topics. And so the teachers actually informed the kinds of topics that we were going to do this year. So last year, when we did as a pilot with one topic, we looked at the Spinosaurus discovery in Morocco. And so the students created digital exhibits about this paleontological discovery in Casablanca. But this year we're looking at renewable energy, which is really important in Casablanca. We're looking at contemporary artists, which was asked by one of our teachers here in Chicago, that the students really want to look at contemporary artists. And so that's an example of something that we're doing that is driven by the students themselves. And as we're thinking about scalability, the interesting thing about STEAM Museum is that it's not about the topic itself, right? It's about how young people are doing virtual exchange and how they're coordinating and collaborating with one another to develop exhibits that are teen-made, that are teen-driven, and that are made for the public. And so, so we're thinking all the time about how is it that this could be modified to any classroom around the world, and how teachers could drive that. So that is actually really important to our work.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we definitely incorporate, we try as much as we can to incorporate the educator feedback in our curriculum design process. Whenever we are having educator feedback, we always go through this M&E process where we have pre-program survey, post-program surveys, interviews with educators and students alike to get the feedback on what they enjoyed about the program, what are things that they have maybe even customized within their own classroom to suit their own needs. And this is something that is always incorporated whenever we are doing this redesign of our educator guide or our activities. We also try to, when we are designing our educator guide or curricula, we always leave room for this customization so that these are, let's say, general guidelines, and each educator can definitely implement the program or do the activities in whichever way suits their needs, kind of thinking of the scalability that Jamila was talking about. Something else that we have been doing this past year is we have been going through the human-centered design process from IDEO, if anyone is familiar with it. And it's basically the belief that the end user, they have the answers, they know exactly what they need. And so we have been going through this process in this past year where not only are we including educators in the process of knowing what they need, but also we have been speaking with youth who also know what they need and what they definitely want in this cultural exchange. Our findings have been very exciting to see the types of interactions that students are looking for, which has also guided us in thinking of our storytelling techniques and knowing that sharing our stories is what would help them be definitely more empathetic.
I think we have a session at our upcoming forum that will be presented by Global Nomads Group on the topic of the findings and the process for your human-centered design work. So we're thrilled to have this preview today, and we hope that, as Mohammed said earlier, people will tune in on the live cast later so that they can see the presentation. We're all very interested to hear more about it. Thank you. And Rana, you mentioned that the findings from your evaluation and assessment are woven back into program design from students, from teachers, and others. We had a question from, I'm trying to see here who it was, from Lisa, asking about how you assess the efficacy of your programs and the extent to which competencies and other skills are being developed. Can you say a little bit more about the methods that you use and the ways that you draw on the things you learn? Both of you are welcome to talk about this.
Yeah, definitely. So part of our monitoring and evaluation process is, the goal of it is not only to make sure that we are achieving our goals, because, at the beginning, let's say, of the session, I was talking about our goals and having youth who are empathetic, globally aware, action-oriented. So that is one thing that we're always measuring to make sure that our programs are achieving what we're hoping for. But also another thing that we are hoping for is that the program was a positive experience for our participants. So one thing that we are using is the pre-program survey, post-program survey, kind of students assessing. So this is not only, let's say, for educators, but this is also for students. And the questions in the survey usually range from seeing their empathy level, their kind of connection with another culture, and kind of how they think of all these different aspects. So there's that comparative aspect between the pre-program survey and the results, let's say, of the post-program survey. But we also engage in field observations, just seeing how things are going in the field, in the classroom. Something else that we are doing is definitely interviews and focus group discussions. Again, just listening to our participants, whether they're educators or students, hearing from their experience. And as you mentioned, all of that feedback is woven into the curriculum redesign, just to make sure that we are hitting what educators and students need.
And similar to Rana with STEAMuseum, we have pre-surveys and post-surveys, and so we have our students do that. But we also have interviews done of teachers and also of the administrators, ourselves included, and so that has provided us feedback directly that will impact the work. And just like Rana, also observations in the field. So because we're a small group, being able to go out and actually look at the work that's actually happening in the classrooms. So when we do when we have the virtual exchanges happen, for example, in Chicago, we always have either myself or a project director, somebody there to sort of see it in action and to take pictures and to see how young people are doing in that work. And then another important piece in terms of like evaluation and sort of seeing how the work is, making sure that we're really getting young people's feedback is to ask the young people themselves, and not only from their voices but from their work. And so for those of us that are educators, an important thing is sometimes there's this a structure called professional learning community. And so professional learning communities are based on teachers coming together and looking at student work. And so for me as an educator and as a curriculum developer, that has been really important. And so I have access to the student work through the digital portal. And so I go on weekly and I look at what is the work that young people are actually creating and how does that work actually align to the goals that we had set out to accomplish in this week's lesson. And so I'll look at that as a way of sort of giving me feedback and sort of tempering, like, yes, young people really did accomplish this, or no, when I look at the storyboard, it looks like that the young people might need more help in the area of language. And so sort of thinking about that. And so that is again why the weekly feedback cycles also with our program facilitators help. So the feedback, observations in the field, and then actually looking at student work as a way of informing the work sort of collectively help us understand the project and how well we are doing.
Great, thank you both. And I would refer today's audience to a webinar that we held a few months ago with the evaluators for the Stevens Initiative, who are both working with us to understand the growth and the evolution of the virtual exchange field, as well as working with our awardee organizations to support their monitoring and evaluation. And so I encourage you to check out the webinar that they presented a few months ago, available on our website and on our YouTube channel and elsewhere. We have a wonderful combo question from Karen. Karen asks, how do you deal with schools that might not have enough bandwidth to maintain a high quality connection for exchange or interruption to the exchange due to technical issues? Is it usually an equipment problem, or is there more to it? And as a second part of the question, Diana asks, what activities would you recommend to reestablish momentum after experiencing technological issues when people's energies have been dampened or interest and enthusiasm has waned? So what's the story with technical issues, and when they inevitably do crop up, what do you do afterwards to get back on track? And thank you for those outstanding questions.
Rana, you want to jump in first? I'm sure you have so many stories.
So I think, as I was mentioning in the beginning of the presentation, and talking about like the online platform that educators use. So one of the reasons we provide this online platform, which is a Moodle-based platform, that it requires, let's say, a minimum amount of bandwidth that it can be used from a laptop, mobile phone, tablet. So kind of the accessibility of that is there are many, let's say, access points. It's also part of the program is to have that asynchronous interaction. So kind of part of the interaction is just knowing that, let's say, if kind of similar to any platform where, I post something today, I might get a response tomorrow. But definitely technical challenges always happen, whether lack of connection to the internet, maybe facing a problem with the device itself, we always provide solutions, and this is something that we always bring up during our professional development session, just knowing that technology unfortunately might fail us in some situations, and we do provide some strategies where maybe students can work in groups, maybe something can be postponed to later. If something does not work for you, we are always there to support. We have had some educators who might send us the work maybe, or just things, different strategies that we can work collaboratively together to make sure that this interaction is moving forward. So we always feel that setting these expectations and knowing that there are some challenges that might come up is always helpful. How to get the morale up is definitely part of the, let's say, the offline work. If the online work is not moving in that particular session, we always leave, as we mentioned, the room for customization, different activities that educators can do, and even different discussions. So just mentioning, let's say, if you do not see a post for any reason, here's a discussion that you all can have that can still help you be on track, but without affecting the progress or without kind of affecting the morale. But definitely setting up also that partnership between the educators, knowing that both of them will be updating each other, whether I don't have internet today, sorry, we'll try our best tomorrow, or anything. Just knowing that flexibility is there and just keeping that open communication with one another.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a great question about technology. It's such a great question. So we have had, you know, of course, hiccups with the technology, et cetera. And so there are kind of two routes that we have with technology, and one of them is a platform that we use for STEAMuseum, and that's a content management system called iRemix, which, as I had mentioned, is out of Digital Youth Network, which is based at Northwestern University in Chicago, in Evanston, Illinois. And so we use their platform, and so that requires students to get online, and to do that, that is very individualized work. And so students actually have their own tablets, or they have their own laptops or computers, and they get online there sort of individually. And so that sort of helps because it's individual work, and so students can work at their own pace. And sometimes, is there difficulty with getting online? You know, we've had those issues, and so having a program facilitator there and help students walk through. Sometimes, to be honest, really one-on-one. Sometimes our program facilitator will actually go one student by one student to make sure that everybody is online, and that's part of it is because we're also testing this content management system. The second, the second sort of route with the virtual exchange part of it is actually using Google Hangouts, and so that's what we utilize for our virtual exchange. And the way, because bandwidth is an issue, and because accessibility and technological equity is definitely an issue in our classrooms in Chicago Public Schools, and then also in Casablanca, we just do our Google Hangouts. Our video conferences have just been sort of all of our students together with all of the students on in the other city. And so the two sister cities are, imagine all the students sort of together on one side and the students together on the other side. And so to do that, it is testing, it is making sure, what we have realized is we do a lot of testing, getting there early, sort of all of the things that you would imagine that you would need to do to make sure that a webcast is happening. And so that is really important. And part of supporting the teachers, and this is important, is that what we have realized, and I think what best practices show around video conferences and virtual exchange, is that you really do need to have outcomes. So what is it that the students are supposed to accomplish that day, and how do you structure that video conference in a way that young people actually accomplish that goal. And so so in our curriculum, we're always thinking about that the goal of this video conference today is XYZ. This is what the students will be doing. And then as a backup, we always have instructional notes. And so thinking about if it doesn't happen that day, that they can move on to the next activity. So that sort of leads into the second the second point, is that our program facilitators know sort of what is coming down the pike in terms of what a next activity would be, so that if that video conference didn't work, that they could move into that activity and say, it's okay, we're going to move on. But part of this thing is also like not getting frustrated, and also having a conversation with the young people. This is, using technology is something that we all do, and part of the goal of our programs is that young people know how to use the technology, and they know how to solve problems, and that they're thinking about different ways of communication. And so we use it as a teachable moment, actually, and say, okay, it's not working today. what are some ways that we could get around it? And the students will say, what about, can you use WhatsApp? Can we try something else? And so really thinking of it as, again, sort of human-centered, that the goal of this is not the technology. The goal of all of our work is the young people communicating with one another, and to use technology as a vehicle to do so. And so if we think about that and we think about the goals, then I think it's really important to think about, okay, how do we get around this bandwidth question? How do we get around when hiccups happen? But being really honest about it.
Thank you both. Taking a somewhat similar approach to a different stage of the process, Dan asks, if you train multiple teachers simultaneously via webinar, so using technology, what are some best practices you can suggest for that? And I know this might apply very much to the Global Nomads program in different phases, and maybe a little bit less so to Chicago sister cities, but if there are things that happen online supporting the teachers or training the teachers, even given that all of the teachers are located in one city on each side, Jamila, then we'd be very interested to hear about that as well. So what's the role of technology? How can you use technology to make it a rich learning experience for the educators?
Can you just clarify the question? So it's about the training, or is it about like the whole experience?
So I'll say the question again. I probably made it overly elaborate. If you train multiple teachers simultaneously via webinar, what are some best practices that you could suggest?
Oh, sure. So one professional development offering, I did talk about the in-person, but also we do have our virtual training. And the way we connect with educators is through either Google Hangouts. Let's talk about Google Hangouts for now, as it is easy to use. So some of the things that we do, kind of going back to the idea of the different internet bandwidth, is definitely testing the technology with the educators before the training. So just making sure that they are able to use it, and also, like webcam works, microphone works, all of these technological aspects work. That is always something that helps in the planning of such a virtual training session. Some of the other things that we do to utilize the time we have together, and knowing that the purpose of the virtual training is definitely for us all to connect from different parts of the world, is giving educators resources before the training, so that during the professional development it is as interactive as possible, where educators don't feel lost, but rather that they have a few resources and they have a few ideas on the content and just what they are, let's say, getting into. Some of if I want to go into more of the tips of a virtual connection, we always kind of have our own guidelines, just knowing that everyone has a different internet speed. So we kind of share guidelines like, speaking slowly, muting your microphone, just things like that. These are things that also help them if they are later on having a virtual connection with their partner educator, that these are skills that they can utilize. Other things that we sometimes do is send educators videos of different aspects. So for example, for the online platform G&G Connect, we do have some video tutorials that they can also watch on their own pace. So kind of something where they can also review things and not feel lost, let's say, during the training. And we always have room for interaction between the participants. We find this also as an opportunity, because it's a global connection, that a lot of educators, if they're joining from different parts of the world, they can share their own strategies and best practices on what they imagine can help their own context, and perhaps even some other educators' context. Thanks.
So just like Rana, we also use Google Hangout to do our weekly check-ins. And so we just did a training actually around our next platform that we are using, where young people are actually going to be, the platform that they'll be using to actually create their exhibits from their artifacts that they have developed over the year. And to do that, we used Google Hangout, and we use the feature about sharing, sharing the screen. That's been really useful. And then just sort of walking through, and part of it is, and this is, again, sort of a little nitty gritty, but sending in advance a lot of the stuff, making sure that everyone has a login, making sure that all those logins work, sending instructional notes in advance. And then in the instructional notes that I write, I actually do screenshots. So I make sure that whatever the platform is that I've actually done the screenshot, and I'll even circle like, here's where you log in. And I know that sounds really technical, but I do think that those are some sort of the best practices that you have to have in mind, is making sure that everybody is coming to the table and that you're not making assumptions, again, about what information they may already have. So when you're, sometimes when we say, oh, just log in on this website, there are a lot of assumptions when you say just log in onto this website, right? And so even just be sort of stepping back and saying, okay, what are the steps for that? And again, as we're thinking about scalability, we're thinking about what are the materials and the resources and the trainings that we are creating that could be scaled to a teacher in another place in the United States or another place in the world, and how is it that what we're doing actually is going to be able to be readable and to be understandable by other people? And so those are the questions that we are asking.
Thank you. And we have just about 1 minute for each of you to answer one last medium length question, and then maybe just a few moments for you to each answer a shorter question. We're coming up on the end of the session. Yusra asks, and this goes very well to Jamila, what you just started talking about where we go from here and what we're building today and how that contributes to a larger future when virtual exchange is even more widespread than it is now. Yusra asks, what is the long-term plan for empowering teachers to maintain the program without the guiding management of in-person facilitators or of additional hands-on training? And that's again for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about sort of our work, and because we are a pilot, I mean, that is such a great question, and that's a critical question actually that we're asking ourselves as well. How are we thinking about scalability and sustainability, and how is this work going to scale if we can't have a program facilitator, for example, in every single classroom? In doing that, the curriculum that is being developed, there is, particularly as we get to the end of the school year and as the projects are getting completed, we are planning a real deep dive with our program facilitators and our teachers to really think about this final curriculum and going through it literally step by step and thinking about, does this make sense? What can be changed? What can be adapted? Those are really important. And the other thing that we're thinking about is actually vignettes and stories, right? And so how does this work actually happening in a classroom, and how does it getting adapted and contextualized in sort of a hyper-local approach? And how could we maybe provide those as examples so that teachers really feel that they can customize this information and move that forward? But that is a real good question. That's a critical question. And I think some of the assumptions around that are the platform that we're going to be using. Will teachers have access, because all of our work is on a particular platform? Is that platform readily available? Can they access it? Is it free? Is it fee-based? Those are some of the questions that we're asking right now, but that is part of it.
So that is a very good question. And just thinking about empowering educators to independently lead the program, that is always the goal, making educators feel that they have the ability to do this with their students without the need for so much support. And so our goal is always to have our curricula, our online platform, whatever technology or any tools that educators and students are using to be intuitive, something that they can figure out on their own, use on their own, and kind of move with it. Part of our support is usually when I was talking, let's say, about having the focal point, is definitely that when someone is implementing something like this for the first time, they definitely need some guidance and support when it comes to using either the technology or even knowing how to incorporate this within their subject if this is something that, again, doing for the first time. These are the things that we usually aim for with educators. We have a lot of returning educators that is helping, in a way, our sustainability. We've had educators who have done the program now 4 times, and they're even asking to do it like a 5th time. And what they are even doing right now is just helping other educators that they know learn more about the program. So this is also something that is helping out a lot, where educators are now becoming their own this community who is familiar with the program, utilizing all of these different resources and tools, and implementing the program within their classroom and customizing it in whatever way suits their needs and their students' needs.
Thank you so much. I think we have some of those champion teachers here in the room today, Rana, from the Global Nomads Group Network. So it's great to see them helping lead this movement. If you could just say in one sentence, what would you say to people who want to get involved in the field, and specifically people who might be interested in joining or connecting with your program or your network? So very briefly, as we wrap up here, I know we're just almost over time. Just in a sentence, what would you encourage people to do to get started?
with Global Nomads Group to visit our website, and so that's basically the best way. In order to get involved, you can definitely go to our website gng.org, where we have a lot of resources that educators can utilize, and anyone who wants to participate, we have a form where they can see our different program offerings, see what works for them, and they can go from there.
And Rana, can you advance to the next slide too, so people can see all the links again as well?
Yes,
Thank
definitely.
You. And Jamila, while we're doing that, do you want to explain what you'd encourage people to do to get started in virtual exchange or connect with you?
Yeah, I would say in a sentence, I would say take an asset-based approach. Think about your teachers and educators and administrators and young people as having the expertise and the knowledge to be able to implement a program and leverage their experience and knowledge and resources to make this experience collaborative towards the goals that you're seeking to accomplish.
Mohammed, I'm sorry we can't hear you yet. You might not be unmuted. You might want to unmute yourself.
Brilliant. Thanks, Henry. Sorry about that, folks. I just want to thank Rana and Jamila for a great webinar. This has been really instructive and really insightful. And Henry, thanks as always for facilitating. I want to thank everybody in the audience who is on board today and chiming in. Hope you'll share this with your networks. This will be posted shortly on our website and on our YouTube channel. And just again, a quick reminder, May 17th and 18th, we'll be hosting our annual virtual exchange forum. So we hope that you all will join us. There's going to be some great conversation building on what you heard today from Rana and Jamila. And we hope you'll join us and stay connected to the Stevens Initiative and to the virtual exchange community. So again, Rana and Jamila, thank you both. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you guys soon. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.